Right, we're off. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this public meeting of the Board of NHS England. And I would like particularly to welcome those members of the public who have joined us here in London this morning. As they're aware, this is a meeting of the board in public as opposed to a wide-ranging public meeting. What we will be doing this morning is discharging our obligations in relation to quite a variety of items that are on the agenda. We meet in public because we believe fundamentally that the people of England have the right to see how decisions affecting the future of the NHS are made and by whom they're made. And we welcome not only those who are with us physically this morning, but also that audience who watch us on live stream, either live at the moment that it's happening or in retrospect sometime afterwards. There are no fire drills planned for this morning, so should the alarm go, our staff will ensure that people are escorted safely off the premises to a place of safety. Let me first then open the board meeting formally by inviting members of the board whether they have any interest that they wish to declare in business that's under consideration this morning. No, thank you very much. We then move on to the minutes of the last meeting. They've been circulated. I've had no responses from members of the board. May I take them as an accurate record? Thank you very much. Are there any matters arising from those minutes that are not otherwise on the agenda? Again, I've had no prior notification of that, so that's a no. In which case, let's move straight on, please, to the Chief Executive's report. David Nicholson.
Thank you, Chairman. And I just think it's worth just slightly the board reflecting on what we did just before Christmas, because it was an extraordinary set of things that we did. We allocated over 200 billion pounds worth of taxpayers' money to the NHS for 2 years. The first time in its history the NHS has had resources allocated, but allocated in a very transparent way. For the first time, everyone can see the workings behind the decision making that was made, and that was I think a big moment for the NHS. And of course, the publication of the planning guidance. And I think it gave us the opportunity, I think, to think kind of forward with ambition about the NHS. And I want to deal with a couple of those issues now. One is in terms of the strategy, and we know right from the beginning that we've all been convinced that one of the great benefits of having an independent organisation, NHS England, is the opportunity that we have to develop strategy, to give consistency of purpose over a significant amount of time for the development of the NHS, not to be in a sense constrained by the electoral timetables or whatever. So very important that we do. And that's exactly what we did with the planning guidance. We set out our ideas about 5 years hence, and that kind of approach, I think, is very radical. We identified the six things that we think the NHS of the future in 5 or 6 years' time might look like. What we describe them as characteristics might not be the right kind of word, but we describe them in that way. We think that this is the most likely way in which healthcare needs to be organised in this country to deliver the outcome improvements that we all want to make. And it's just worth kind of just very quickly reflecting on those six. The first and the most important, undoubtedly, was the role in which citizens and patients will play in taking the NHS forward in a very direct way, both in terms of controlling their own health, but also controlling their own healthcare, the variety of enablers that we need to put in place to make that happen. One of the most significant things that we will do is put a monetary value against all of that, because what that does, then that starts to give organisations the opportunity to invest in supporting and enabling patients and citizens in a way that we've never done before, in a way that we can see a return for that investment. That will be a very, very significant and important thing, and in a sense runs through all the rest of the issues that we deal with. The second one was particularly related to services that we provide for people with long-term conditions. As we know, a large and burgeoning number of people in this country, and the importance of primary care at scale, and expanded primary care to enable people to access those services and support those services is going to be really significant for us. The third one was particularly focusing on those people with complex needs, and that is the kind of integration model, a model of integration, learning the lessons from the extensivist model and other models that are around across the world, which have been shown to be significantly beneficial to people with complex needs, whether they are mental health or physical needs. The fourth issue is the radical changes around urgent emergency care, which I know Bruce is going to be talking about later. Just one simple thing in relation to all of that, moving to between 40 and 70 major emergency centres will, I think, have a significant effect on the way in which services are configured and organised across the whole country. The radical changes that we need in terms of productivity for elective care, we think that between 25 and 30% productivity gain can be made, and we can see in parts of this country and across the world that can happen to radically change the access and arrangements for people who need elective care. And of course, for us, a particularly important one around specialised commissioning, where we have over 300 organisations currently providing specialised services and working towards a position where we'd have between 15 and 30. When you add all of those things together, and that's what we want people to do in terms of their local plans, that represents, I think, a very radical and ambitious shift in the way NHS services are organised across the country. A very kind of, I think, a compelling set of ambitions for the NHS, and people are now working through all of those. But this is a very challenging time for the NHS, but I think people are up for that particular challenge. So, really important set of things that we did at that board meeting, and I think it's reflected in the ongoing strategy work that we've got. This week we've published Anytown CCG, a kind of a set of documents to help people think about the future, think about the nature of the challenges that they face, identifying those things, those service changes to improve outcomes and the quality of service that they can do, which will change the nature of healthcare, but also change it in a way that we can stay within broadly the financial parameters that we have, both looking at it from an urban, suburban and a rural perspective, to ensure that people have got the tools that they need to take their planning and organisation of services forward. So a real kind of, in a sense, ambition for the future. And indeed, we are, NHS England is planning and organising an Expo event in March. Well, I think Tim might want to say something about this. This is a really important event, and it is part of all of what I said, giving ambition and looking forward to the NHS going forward, giving people a framework, sharing ideas to enable it to happen. But I think Tim might want to say something about that.
Sure. So the Expo will be the largest event of its kind in the history of the National Health Service, and it comes, as you've just said, at a really important moment. It's designed to be an opportunity for the leadership of the service to immerse itself in thinking differently about transforming service delivery, particularly with the emphasis so rightly on patient outcomes and patient experience. So it brings together kind of all sorts of examples of ways in which people are doing that, are thinking differently, using things like technology, other sorts of innovation, marshalling the power of people. In broadly, the Expo is in three parts. The perhaps the most important of those is what we call the pop-up university, a kind of a series of seminars, workshops, involving all sorts of partners right across the community of people interested in the health service to work with NHS staff on thinking differently about the things I've mentioned. People can start registering for those seminars, lectures, courses on January the 31st. So one thing I would strongly encourage people to do, take advantage of that opportunity and go onto the website and register by that or from that date. The second part is, of course, is a giant exhibition, a kind of an eye-opener really on different ways of doing things. We've got all sorts of amazing people from within the service and outside it, innovators, the Lewisham Choir, footballers from Manchester United, just a whole diversity of people coming together to kind of work on how we can make this service sustainable and invariably high quality. And the third part really is just an opportunity for individuals in the service to start talking to each other. So there's a lot of emphasis on network, and one big feature of this year's Expo is something called Camp Expo, which is a way of sort of shaping your own journey through the kind of conference and the exhibition. So that's all on March 3rd and 4th in Manchester. We think it'll be a transformational event. Lots and lots of work has gone into it, and the role of the board, of course, is going to be vital. So individual members of the board will be, I hope, already in conversation with the team to think about how they themselves can demonstrate leadership in this agenda. But that's broadly where we're at. So I mean, the issue really is that I hope everybody here will feel take the opportunity of really advertising the opportunity of Expo to their own networks. And we'd be very appreciative of that.
Good, thank you very much. Any other observations on the Chief Executive's report? I think what we would all agree as a board is that those 6 characteristics that David has outlined are actually very radical indeed. There's an extraordinary amount of change is implied by each of those choices, and yet they add up to a coherent package, a coherent framework for how we would envisage the NHS developing over the coming 5 to 10 years in an era of continued financial austerity, but with that in itself as a great catalyst for ensuring that we secure maximum value for patients from the investment that the taxpayer makes in the NHS. And we as a board are going to have, I think, an extraordinary volume of work to undertake in order to give effect to the delivery of each of those 6 characteristics. Kieran and Moira.
Really quick, David, I think they're great. I love them. How do we communicate them and make sure we're not having a conversation with ourselves and we get lots of people to buy into them? How are we going to do that bit?
Yeah.
Before you answer, mine was just following up on whether your appearance in front of 2 parliamentary committees gave you the opportunity to promote them, or whether it was looking backwards really rather than forwards.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Okay. I mean, one of the things I think about the communication of them and the work around them is that this needs to be a whole organisation responsibility. This is not half a dozen people having clever ideas. This is about how we're all mobilising our own, the whole of our organisation, and that's why when we will bring back our business plan to the board in March, where we're now working through what it actually means in practice. How are we going to communicate it? What are the tools we're going to use to make it a reality? How are we going to allocate the resources of our organisation to back each of those things? And we're working on that at the moment, and we'll be bringing that to the board in March to enable us to do that. I have to say that my being in front of parliamentary committees has not given me the opportunity to do that. But you'll be pleased that I'm appearing in front of the Public Accounts Committee on Monday on severance payments, which I don't know whether I'll have the opportunity to do it. But we'll use every opportunity over the next period to do that.
I think it's worth observing is that the 6 characteristics haven't been plucked from mid-air. It's a consequence of our call to action of 250 or more engagement events across the country, and a process which is continuing. And I think what is quite heartening about this is to see the degree of support that's emerging from the clinical community, from patients' representative groups, and from others, and the general appreciation that we cannot continue with an NHS which is structured in its present form and hope still to provide the highest quality care to patients against the levels of investment that we're putting in. So we're ready to, I think, use the power of commissioning properly and appropriately to bring about these very significant changes. Are there any other questions or issues for David on the back of his report?
Can I just add something
Yes.
to it? I know that we, at our previous meeting, I reported that we'd had a meeting with the executive team had had a workshop with a group of young people and children around the future of the NHS as what's going forward. It's an important, I think, constituency for us. Indeed, we were. It was commented at our annual general meeting about the lack of younger people on our board, this is increasingly an important thing for the NHS to connect with young people, because it is a different paradigm of thinking about health and healthcare. And Bruce and I met a group of junior doctors this week to talk about, and they have a very different view about how healthcare is delivered and all the rest of it. And I think the kinds of initiatives where the NHS is sponsoring young people to volunteer in the NHS and make connections, I think kind of rebuilding that relationship between the population and the public and the NHS is a really important part of what we do.
And a group that has a very different relationship to technology and to institutions and to how it engages both with each other and with the broader NHS. Right, well, thank you very much. Thank you to the Chief Executive for the report.